Hello everybody, this is Sir Jet and welcome to another episode of The Contemporary World. Today our lesson is social globalization. If you remember, our past lessons are political, economic, and cultural globalization. In political globalization, we talked about how political systems spread around the globe. In economic systems, or in economic globalization, we talked about how economic systems spread around the world. And just last time, we talked about how culture is spreading around the world. Today, we will look at how the modes of socializations, how socialization is spreading around the world, and we call it social globalization. Okay? Let's now go to the computer and see what this is all about. Social globalization. Okay. So we all know that we human beings, we are a social animal. Okay, that means of all the animals, we are the smartest, or we are the highest, because we socialize. We have a way of communicating to fellow humans. Other animals may be just making sounds or making faces, or they have their instincts that wire them together. But for us human beings, we have language, and we use language to socialize to one another. So we are called a social being. We interact with one another, and socialization is very essential in our life. Maybe as essential as eating 3 times a day, or as essential as the air we breathe every second. So we do socialization practically all our lives. Okay? Now, we will look at how socialization happened from the beginning of time up to the present, and we will look at trends on how socialization is going to the future. So let us start with the primitive times, wherein the only mode of socialization is face-to-face interaction. Yes, that is the simplest, and that is the most primitive, the original form of communication. When you want to talk to somebody in your family, you walk up to that person and you say what you need to say, and the other person has to listen to you as you deliver your speech. And if you want to talk to somebody outside your family, like your neighbor or your community, you do the same. You just have to go and meet the person face to face. That is how communication and socialization was in the primitive times. And when people started to live in cities and city-states in the great civilizations, people learned how to write. Okay, so now we have a second mode of socialization added to face-to-face communication, and that is the written form of communication, or written socialization. And they take the form of personal letters, edicts of kings, and books. Now this has been the mode for the next thousands of years. People would talk face to face and would write to one another until around the late 1400s. That's around the time of Magellan. The advent of mass media came with the invention of the printing press. This is how the printing press looked like. Okay? And it's literally a press because they use block letters in the reverse. Okay? You put ink on this, and then you use this like a stamp pad to press on the paper, and so the paper would now have a positive image of the paragraph or the sentence you assembled using this thing. Okay, so with that, mass production of writings was now possible. Okay, and so newspapers were invented, and that's what we call the print media. Okay, and people started to read more, and then people started to receive more messages coming from faraway lands because of the print media. Okay, they are called the press in our time because literally, as I told you a while ago, they press on the paper to come up with a printed page. All right, so this happened a long time ago, maybe around 500 years ago. And then until the mid 1800s, a new technology was invented. It's called the telegram. I don't know if you know this technology, but when I was a little boy, it's quite popular still. And this is a technology wherein messages are transported using a cable wire. And what goes on the cable wire is Morse code. Morse code, like a series of beeps. Okay, like there's a long beep and a short beep, like beep 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 beep, like that. And it's a code that means a letter can be represented by a series of short or long beeps. And so you transmit that from point A, travels across a very, very long cable wire to point B, and the person on point B would decipher the code and type the message on using a typewriter. Okay, type it on paper, and they would send that message to the person that needs to receive that message. And that's how messages were transported in the mid 1800s up to around the 1980s when I was a little boy. And so humans later on discovered that not only beeps, not only Morse code can travel on the cable wire, but also the human voice can travel along or travel on that cable wire. And that is now the invention of the telephone. So it uses the same principle, except that you can now talk directly to the person on point B, and he will hear your voice real time. And that was invented in the late 1800s. Okay, so in just less than a century, the telegram technology was improved into the telephone technology. And another less than half a century later, around 30 years later, people discovered that the human voice and sounds, music can transfer or can travel not only on the cable wire but also on the airwaves. And that is what we call as radio technology. Okay? And radio broadcasting began in the 1920s. So how does this work? There is a radio tower, which is the transmitter, and several kilometers away there would be a radio receiver. Okay, so the transistor radio box that you have in your living room or maybe in your car, okay, there is a radio receiver. And so the voice that comes from the radio tower will ride on the airwaves, and it will be caught by your radio receiver, and thus you can hear the voice from that box in your home or in your car. And that is radio broadcasting technology invented in the 1920s. Now, years later, not too long from the 1920s, but just around 20 years later, television broadcasting began. People discovered that not only the human voice can ride on the airwaves, but also images, also pictures. And so the television was invented. Same principle. You have a TV tower and you have a TV receiver on the other end. The boob tube, as they call it in the primitive days of television. A big box in your living room, and when you open it, it captures the airwaves. It has an antenna that catches the airwaves carrying the images transmitted from the TV tower. And so people can now see images broadcasted to their living rooms. That was the 1940s. And just a few years later, the internet was discovered. So humans learned how to transmit messages not only on the airwaves, okay, but in the atmosphere, but beyond the airwaves, in outer space. Humans have put a satellite that would beam messages, okay, text, and at first it's called email, okay, from point A on the surface of the earth to several points on the surface of the earth. And that is the internet technology in the 1980s. The most simple kind of internet message then was the email. And then later on, people started to transmit not only emails but also images and videos using the internet. Wow, fantastic. Now backtracking a bit from our 2020 time, but it's a bit forward, 10 years from the invention of the email, the cell phone was invented. The 1990s, and the first cell phones just has human voice and later text. And now what we have are everything that your laptop can have is in your cell phone. And that's what we call social media, which is invented in the 2000s. So now, using your cell phone or your laptop computer, you can see images, videos, text, real time, okay, of whatever your social media friends are transmitting from the other side of the planet. Wow, can you imagine this? How far socialization has become, starting from the primitive days up to the present. Fantastic. Socialization is so intense right now. So many people are meeting up one another online. And it's so easy to talk to one another, to socialize with one another, compared to the time of the cavemen, wherein you really need to walk up to that person to say what you need to say. But now you can do everything right where you are in your home, and you can talk to somebody in Antarctica or somebody in Africa. All right, so you can see this is how socialization evolved. Okay, whether it be one-on-one communication or mass audience communication, we have gone a long, long way. So today, what we have is the quad media. When I was in college, our professors just teach us that tri-media, TV, radio, and television. Oh, TV, radio, and newspapers. But now, there's a fourth mass medium, which is the internet. So what we have is the quad media. We get news and information from four sources. And today, because of social media, okay, because of the fourth mass medium, which is the internet, there is massive personal communication across the globe. Massive, that means I'm talking about billions of people, not millions, but billions of people interacting in the internet. That's massive personal communication for you. And so not only simple personal communication happens online, but practically every aspect of life can be done online these days. Like shopping, okay? You can just click and order what you want and it gets delivered to you. Also banking, transfer money from this place to that person. You can do that online. Job hunting. You know, in the old days, how do we look for jobs? We go to the bulletin board of buildings. So you really have to be physically present in the building to see the announcement on the bulletin board. Wanted, okay, a teacher or wanted journalist. You have to be physically traveling to look for jobs. Or you can buy Manila Bulletin on Sundays and they have one big section for job hunters. But now you can just browse the internet and look for the job that you are fitted to do. And how about courtship and dating? Before, you need to travel and meet face to face with the one you are courting. But now you can do courtship without traveling. You just use social media for courtship and dating. And how about this? Entertainment, whatever your trip may be. Sports, music, you can look for this online. You can look at YouTube. You can use a Facebook Live to watch your favorite sporting event or a musical concert. Fantastic. And right now, what we are doing is online education. Okay, so before, you have to be physically present in school to get a degree. But now more and more people and schools are venturing into online education. So much more with the COVID-19 pandemic happening these days. Things have changed a lot. The social landscape is having a tectonic shift. It's not just a typhoon walking by your place, but it's a tectonic shift. That means the whole landscape is moving and it's changing drastically from the way it was before. A tectonic shift in the social landscape. And thinking about the new normal, I want you to really focus on that these days. What could the new normal look like? How are we to socialize after the pandemic? Before, we can really touch one another, having a conversation, and have no mask. But now, how do we socialize? Think about that. Shall we continue to maintain social distancing even after the COVID days are over? Can we go back to the pre-COVID days? What will happen to certain industries like tourism? Will there be tourists visiting beaches and museums? How about sports? Can you play basketball and football in the post-COVID days? How about mass transportation? What will happen to the LRT, to jeepneys, to tricycles? What will happen to the music industry? Your favorite rock star, what will happen to him? And in education, what could our schools look like in the new normal? How about Christian churches? How would they conduct their worship services? And how about other religions like Islam? How will they do their worship services? Think about these things. These are human activities under the umbrella called socialization. And the world is now wondering, what will socialization look like in the very near future? So for a conclusion, we have seen in this lesson that the world is now getting smaller and smaller because of mass media and the internet. There is now increased connectivity from one person to another because of the internet. So far from the scenario during the caveman years. And with the COVID-19 pandemic, things have changed and are continuously changing, especially in the field of socialization. The pandemic is really a game changer. So, did you learn many things today? We have seen how socialization has evolved from the primitive time to the present, and how the scope of socialization is now very global. Okay, so that's why it's called social globalization. So this is Sir Jet saying thank you for being with me, and I'll see you in our next episode.